One moment, getting set up. Welcome, everybody. There we go. Welcome. My name is Elliot. I am the IELTS expert at Magoosh, and I'm excited to have another lesson with you here today. All of my students here who are in Conversation Club, you know that yesterday I had some technical difficulties with my computer. We're all set up today, so no problems with that anymore. So it's nice to see all of you here, and we're going to get started in a moment. We're also, once again, we are broadcasting this live on YouTube for folks to look in on what we're doing. So welcome everybody there on YouTube. I'd invite everybody today to, when you have questions and things to say, please use the chat feature, and that's for both YouTube and for my Magoosh students here on Zoom. That's the best way during these classes to ask your questions instead of unmuting. That starts to get a little bit difficult to manage, just the sounds of people with their microphones on and all of those kinds of things. So I will be monitoring the chat all along. I see some people saying hello in the chat right now. Welcome to you, and thanks for coming here again today. Let's see. So we need to, for Magoosh students, we need to start recording this. We'll put this, get this session recorded and out on your dashboard after the lesson today. So one moment, let me start that recording. There we go. All right. And just getting set up there. Okay, so let's get started here today with our lesson. We're going to talk about listening. Actually, this week, our topic is going to be on listening. Today, we're going to focus on a set of recommendations to help you improve your listening skills in general. So we are thinking about not only about IELTS, but also how can you work on listening so that you can make improvements if you have a few weeks to study or if you have a few months to study. There are things you can do to improve. And I'm assuming for most of you that you do not attend an English class. You're possibly self-studying, or maybe you're studying in a small group of people. So I'm trying to think of ways you can use your time, especially if listening is a concern of yours, that you can make improvements and just get better at listening in English and improving those skills. So that's what we're going to focus on today. If you come back on Thursday for Thursday's lesson, we are going to, good, I see a question in there from Kamal. Yes, on Thursday's question, on Thursday's lesson, we are going to focus on specific IELTS listening question types and thinking about how to approach them. Okay, so these two lessons today and Thursday kind of work together because we're thinking generally about how to improve. And on Thursday, we'll think about IELTS specific questions, okay? So that's kind of what we're focusing on here today. And so Kamal, yes, we will take a look at diagrams and maps in our lesson on Thursday. Today, we're gonna focus on a few different things, okay? So my goal for today is to present to you some strategies for practicing speaking, or listening. And then also at the end, I'm going to give you some resources you can use to work on your listening skills, things that I recommend, especially for IELTS, not just completely in general, but some resources that will give you practice, really useful practice with listening material that will improve your abilities on the IELTS listening test. Okay, so that's what that's our focus today. When you have questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat for me there. I'll take a look. If it's something that fits with what I'm talking about at the moment, I will stop and talk about it. And if not, then we can save some of the questions for a part of the lesson where it makes sense to talk about it. Okay, all right, everybody. So let's jump in. Let's get going. Here's what we're focusing on today. So the lesson overview at the top of your slide there that you're looking at. So what we want to focus on is how to use a combination of the 4 approaches that you see listed there. We call them immersion, variety listening, focused practice, and focused practice focused on IELTS. How you can use these 4 different approaches in combination with each other in order to improve your listening abilities. Okay, so I'm going to recommend a way of studying. Okay, this is going to mean that, you know, there are no, I say this in a lot of my lessons. What we're looking at here today are not quick and simple tricks for making small adjustments to your IELTS test. What we're looking at here are habits that you form, study habits, so that you can improve over time. Okay, and so that's why we're focusing on it this way. There's no simple way, as you probably know, to learn a language, right? You have to put in the time and the effort. And what we're focusing on today is how to maximize your time, your effort, so that you're getting the most benefit out of it. That's what we're thinking about here with these approaches, okay? So we're gonna walk through each one of these approaches, talking about what it's about, what the recommendation is, and at the very end, I'll give you a bunch of resources on how to improve this. Now, I have a little asterisk down here, a little qualifier, a caveat down at the bottom. And I want to mention this. So one important thing for all of you focusing on the IELTS listening test is the listening, as you probably are aware, the listening test is really unusual compared to other listening tests you've probably had in your life, in your English classes and things like that. Typically in English classes, a teacher will play something and then maybe you'll have a quiz on it and you'll have a few questions after you've listened to the whole thing. You answer a few questions to see if you comprehend it. As you know, if you're studying for your IELTS exam, the IELTS listening test is different. You have to answer as you listen. And this is a difficult skill. I think it's even difficult for when I show the IELTS test to native English speakers. At first, they're like, "Well, what am I supposed to do here?" This is a kind of an unusual thing to have to answer questions as you listen. So everything we're talking about here today applies for people at all levels, and also for all of you studying for the IELTS exam. You need to make sure that you are continuing to study strategies and specific IELTS questions to practice the skill of answering listening questions as you listen to the recording. Okay, so we'll talk about that at the very end. I just want to make it very clear that there are 2 sort of separate sides to what we're talking about today. There's your English language ability, and your ability to listen and comprehend things in English. And then there's IELTS skill, okay? And the 2 work together, but the IELTS skills need to be worked on as well, okay? And so what we want to do is find a balance in our practice between those 2 things. All right, so we'll keep that in mind. The very last approach number 4, we'll talk more about that in detail, okay? So that's an overview of where we're going and what we're about to do. Let's jump in. Let's do it. All right, whoops. So first of all, I want to give you, as a language teacher, I want to give you some general principles of listening practice that you should follow with almost all of your listening practice that you do, okay? So a few things that you should keep in mind. First of all, you want to limit using subtitles when you are listening to material. I know some students like to practice listening by watching TV and movies. That is excellent. I recommend it. However, if you are using subtitles as you're watching, especially as you use subtitles the first time through you're watching something, you are actually doing reading practice. You are not doing listening practice, okay? So if you want to improve your listening, you need to keep those subtitles off, especially the first time you listen to something, okay? Now, as we'll talk about later, subtitles can be useful. We will talk about that, and I think they can be very useful for your listening practice. But get in the habit when you are practicing listening in English to trying to turn off the subtitles the first time through, okay? That's principle number 1. Principle number 2, especially for you IELTS students, you need to be intentionally trying to listen to different English accents, okay? And especially the ones that are represented on the IELTS test. So as you are probably aware, there's a lot of British English on the IELTS test. There's some American English often. There's English from Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Those are the major ones that are represented often on the IELTS exam. So this means you need to be trying to find sources to listen to from different places around the world and mixing all of that into your listening practice, okay? The accents and some of the vocabulary are different between the different Englishes, not extremely different, but somewhat different. And it is important for the IELTS test to at least give yourself an opportunity to practice some of them. Okay, Aisha, I see you can't hear me. Can others hear me okay that are on the lesson? It might be an issue with your audio, Aisha. Okay, I see some yeses. Okay, so Aisha, it might be your audio needs to be picked up there. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can figure that one out there. Or it could be your connection. Okay, thanks everybody. Listen to a mix of accents. All right, video. Video is good for listening practice. You should use it, and I'll talk about that again. I'll talk about that later. But you should also practice a lot of things without visual cues first, right? Because that is what you're going to, that's what you're going to encounter on the IELTS listening test, right? Now, there are some visual cues. There are sometimes, as we talked about a minute ago, some map questions, diagrams. Also, in a way, the questions that they ask you are kind of sometimes cues for you, right? When you're answering a set of note-taking questions, you get to look at them first, and that gives you a little bit of information about what you're about to listen to, okay? So IELTS test does give you a little bit of visual information, but as you know, if you've ever had to sort of listen and try to comprehend somebody speaking to you on the phone in another language versus watching them on TV or watching me right now, right? You can see my mouth move, you can see my expressions, you can see the information that I'm putting up on my PowerPoint screen. When you have all that visual information, it helps you to understand things. And it is good practice to try to limit those things sometimes. So you're just focusing on the audio, okay? So that's another tip here as you're forming your practice habits, all right? A couple more, and then we're gonna dive into our approaches. You will get more out of listening practice if you do something with the information you hear. So there are times when you should just enjoy listening to something and put on your earphones and take a walk and listen to the podcast, and that's fine. But you will get more out of it if you take the information you've listened to and do something with it. And approach number 3 and 4 that we're going to talk about later in this hour will give you some ideas on things you can do with your listening material to get the most out of them. Okay, so just focusing on this generally right now, and we will talk about it. Good. Good. Gandali, I see your question. Are Spotify podcasts and English speeches, are they good enough? They are good to focus on. I'm going to give you some more ideas a little bit later in the lesson to add to the things that you're listening to. And Spotify podcasts, there's a million different things that you could choose from there. Probably you could build a really solid listening practice library just from Spotify. But I want to give you some other things to look at so that you can get some inspiration as well. So I promise later in the lesson, I'm going to share a page with a few ideas on how to start with that. Okay, but those are good. I know a lot of students who use Spotify and to listen to different kinds of English speeches. I think it's good. Okay. Good. Let's keep moving. Just a couple more here. The best material is the last one, and this is really important. the best materials to study for listening practice, especially all of you, in general, the IELTS studying crowd has moved beyond the very beginning levels of English study. Many of you are in the sort of intermediate to advanced range as you're studying for the IELTS exam. And at this point in your studying, it's best to focus on materials that are made for English speakers, not for English language learners. There's some good English language learner materials out there. They tend to be from textbooks or things that you need to pay for, okay? But, so that's not great. But fortunately, there is a lot of content out there on the web, on Spotify, on different places with free content, podcasts and other things that are made for English speakers. Okay, the reason that's better is because that is giving you realistic use of English, and speakers are speaking at a normal rate of speed usually. The language they use is not modified to make it simpler than it needs to be. So focusing on materials that are for English speakers is a really good recommendation, especially for all of you at the intermediate to advanced levels. Okay. Now, the one exception to that is, of course, you need to use real IELTS. You need to use IELTS materials to listen as well. Okay, so on Magoosh, we've got lots and lots and lots of listening passages for you. Any official materials you purchased or can be a good idea from Cambridge English, or other places where you're getting official sources. That is a critical piece of your IELTS study. So so those, again, we're thinking about English development and we're thinking about IELTS study, and you need to have both in your repertoire, in your practice habits that you're creating for yourself. Okay, so these are some general principles for listening practice. Now let's get into our approaches, okay? So as a reminder of what I said at the beginning of the lesson, what I'm thinking about here is I'm imagining that all of you out there are self-studying. You're trying to do your best for the IELTS exam. Maybe you have a tutor, maybe you work with a group to study, but generally you're on your own. And the question I'm trying to help you answer is, how can I improve my English language skills, my listening skills, in a short amount of time, in a month or several weeks before I take the test? And so that's what I'm going to recommend here, okay? Good. And Farinaz, before we move on, what about academic lectures? It's harder than podcasts because of the paraphrase vocabularies. Yeah, academic lectures can be good. Later in the lesson, I will recommend a few places with some academic-like lectures. And those are, of course, going to be a lot like part 4 of the listening test. Those are, yes, if you are finding academic lectures online, I know that there are a bunch of MOOCs, and I believe Yale University in the US puts out a bunch of free lectures. I think a lot of colleges and universities are doing that now. Those can be really, those are great, especially for part 4. That does replicate the style of the last section of the listening test. Yes, so that is a good idea. Scientific podcast, good. Is listening the same for both academic and general training? Yes, everything we're saying here applies for academic and general training equally, okay? So the listening test is exactly the same between those two tests. The reading section and the writing sections are different, but general training and academic listening are exactly the same. So everything I'm saying here is good for both tests, all right? All right, good questions. All right, let's get in here. So approach number 1 to listening. Here's my idea. I'm assuming that all of you, I'm hoping all of you out there are doing a little bit of listening in English every week. Maybe it's just listening for the IELTS test and practicing for the test. Maybe you're doing listening outside of that. Now what I want to recommend is let's treat your IELTS exam like you are going to run a marathon race, Or let's treat your IELTS exam like you are a musician and you have a major concert coming up. When is your concert? Is it in 1 month? Is it in 3 months? Is it in 6 months? What can we do between now and your exam day to begin training harder and harder and harder and more intensely for the concert or the race that you're going to run, or whatever it is you want to imagine, where we're trying to make improvements and get into shape right before your big test. Okay, I assume you're already doing a lot, and I also, of course, assume that all of you are busy people with jobs or school or families or all of those things, and so there's a limited amount of time. So what I want to recommend here is some things that you can do to try to make little incremental improvements over time before your test. Approach number one is what I call immersion. And this is the easiest thing to do for most students, okay? And so this is something I highly recommend that you try to build into your weekly schedule a little bit. So the goal here is to simply increase the amount of time that you are listening to English, immersing yourself in English material. And so the question I'd ask all of you, if I was in a room one-on-one with you right now, is how much do you listen to English every week? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 1 hour? Is it a lot? Is it a lot more than that? At some point, maybe you're living in an English-speaking culture and you are hearing English all of the time. Okay, some students may have that as their reality, but many of you do not. So how much do you listen to English now? And could you increase that amount by 25%, 10%, 50%? What's realistic for you? Set a goal. I want to listen to a little more English than I do now, and I want to figure out what's realistic for me on a weekly basis. Now, the immersion idea is that you're simply giving yourself more opportunities to hear and think in English. Okay, I see some people listening to Netflix all the time right now. Good, good. As much as you can, listening to English and just being in an English thinking and speaking context in your life in some way. When you're taking a walk, when you are on the bus going to work, when you are cooking dinner, whatever it is, maybe you get those headphones on and you listen to something in English. This is a very relaxed and easy approach to take. Okay, you can choose entertaining subject matter. With this approach, I don't really care that much as an English teacher what you're listening to, as long as it meets those objectives we talked about before. It should be something made for English speakers, not for English language learners specifically. It should be something where you're not reading the subtitles, you're actually listening to the English, but it can be entertaining and enjoyable, funny, whatever topics. If you enjoy sports, listen to English, listen about sports in English. If you enjoy music, if you enjoy whatever, cooking podcasts, or I don't care what it is, something related to your job, listen a little bit more to that kind of material in English every week. That's a simple goal to try to hit. So it is often best to find materials that you can control in some way. Okay, so radio programs coming over the radio, you can't really rewind those things. It's best to have some control over them so you can go back and review some things you didn't hear or understand, if possible. So that, unfortunately, these days, that's a lot of stuff, right? Almost everything you find out there is online or podcasts or something you can back up if you need to. Here's a principle, though, for the material that you choose for just immersing yourself in English. If you can't understand 75% of it or more, it's probably not very useful. Okay, below that, it starts to get really frustrating and you're not comprehending very much. Okay, and so as you're selecting things to listen to, try to find things that are at a pace and at a difficulty level where you can get most of what's there. You can follow along. You may miss ideas throughout regularly, but you can at least get the main idea of what they're talking about and most of the details that are there, okay? If it's below that, then you're gonna have to start doing things like reading subtitles and other things, and it becomes less useful than it could be, okay? Yeah, good question, Raphael. So Raphael's pointing out, radio forces you to understand things, right? There's no, like I was talking about earlier, there's no context, visual information on radio. Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yes, I'm not saying radio is not useful. I'm saying, there are benefits to listening to things that you can sort of back up and rewind. And so that's something to keep in mind as you're listening to things here. Yeah. No, it's a good point. Yeah. And so the point earlier was, you can do that kind of practice with all kinds of things, radio, podcasts, whatever, where you limit the visual cues that you have, the visual information. Radio is certainly good. I don't want to say don't use radio. I'm just saying there can be benefits to backing up and replaying, especially if you don't understand something. Good. Good. Yeah, Lohit, I see your question there. Is there some recommendation about part 4? Yes, let's get to part 4 in just a little bit when I recommend some resources for you. I promise that's coming really, really soon. Okay. On the next slide, actually, we're going to start thinking about some of those materials. Okay. Good. Yeah. And another comment there, that on the IELTS speaking test, you can't pause material. Yes, that is true. So yes, when you're practicing for IELTS specifically, you should not pause things. You should not pause to answer questions. No, yes, that's correct. What I'm talking about here is using listening material to understand and to comprehend and to improve your listening abilities, right? As a kind of a way to improve your English skill. And there is, when you are listening to something, let's say you listen to 5 minutes of something and you're at minute number 3, and suddenly there's a section where, oh man, I didn't understand what they said in minute number 3. It can be beneficial to have the ability to go back and listen to that again as a way to get the most you can out of listening practice generally, okay? For IELTS practice, absolutely, don't stop, don't rewind, don't do the things that are not exam-like. But to develop your English skill, it can be useful. It can be very useful, okay? All right, now, if you are listening to things that you're having trouble understanding, okay, one thing you can try to do, and this has some benefit to it, is to listen to things that you're already a little bit familiar with. So if you read the news, for example, and you're familiar with global news stories that you read in your own language, it can be beneficial then to go listen to a challenging news piece, challenging in terms of language level, about the story that you're already familiar with. You have some background knowledge about it, and now you can listen to it in English, and you're likely to get a little bit more out of that source than you would otherwise, okay? Again, these are tips if you are listening to things like news reports and you're just not getting very much out of it. That can be one way to approach that problem and get more out of the listening practice you're doing. You can also, I know that some people listen to ebooks. Ebooks can be good to listen to for listening practice generally, especially if it's a tough book. If it's a book you've already read, possibly in your own language, or you read it in English and now you're going to listen to it, that can be another good way to listen to more challenging material and still get a lot out of the experience, okay? And lastly, you can listen to things about topics that you're familiar with. So if you like things like TED Talks or other academic lecture things and on areas that you're familiar with, that can be really good way to get more out of really challenging listening material, okay? So approach number 1 is, as you are looking at your weeks ahead before your IELTS test, can you increase the amount of English listening you do by some percent, 25%, whatever, and just be relaxed about it. Choose some things you enjoy listening to and add more listening into your routine as much as possible in the weeks before your IELTS test. That little bit of increased immersion into English can have big benefits if you make it a routine, if you make it something that you do regularly, okay? So that's approach number one, right? All right, now let's move to approach number two, variety listening. Here's where I want to start giving you a couple of specific places that you can go to work on IELTS-specific language, IELTS-specific listening passages that are going to really focus on things that are quite useful for the test, okay? So here, with variety listening, we're trying to improve your ability to comprehend a wide variety of topics, accents, voices, and speeds, okay? This is similar to the immersion approach, and this is something you could actually combine together into one kind of approach. But here, what we're trying to focus on is looking around and being very intentional about choosing materials that are from a wide variety of topics and a wide variety of places around the world where English is spoken, a variety of speeds, a variety of settings. So IELTS settings are academic for parts 3 and 4. And then we have more real life kind of listening. So trying to think about how we are getting a mix of listening practice to focus on the areas that are going to benefit you most for the IELTS test. Let's look at, I want to share one resource with you here. One moment. Oops. You can probably hear my dog barking down below. Sorry about that. I want to share a resource with you here. This is something on our blog. I'm going to scroll to the top, sorry. And I'll share it here for all of you on YouTube as well. One moment, let me get this in the chat. All right, this is a Magoosh resource on our blog. This is one of my favorites for English language development for self-study for students. And we have some recommendations here for self-study. I've got this shared up here on my screen. I'll scroll down. You'll be able to see if you look through this. There are tips and recommendations for all 4 sections of the test. This is not just focused on listening practice, but what we have down below is a kind of 10-week study schedule that you can use to work on English development on your own. And part of the plan here that I want to share is the variety listening idea. That's down here in the middle. So if I click on that, or if I click on that and go down, it gives a description of what this exercise is about. Okay, so with variety listening, what you're trying to do is, like I said a moment ago, gain exposure to a wide variety of English topics, speeds, and accents, and all those kinds of things by focusing on a wide variety of different passages and listening types. So in this study plan that we have, okay, there are, if you scroll down, we kind of organize it into a weekly plan that you could follow if you want to. But what I want to focus on here is the listening part. In the plan here, I've got lots and lots of links to different listening resources that are going to be really valuable for focused variety listening to a variety of things and making sure that those things are as useful as they can be for IELTS practice. Now, none of these things are IELTS listening exercises, okay? But they are places where you can find resources, materials that are going to be very appropriate for the test, and they're going to give you a wide mixture of exposure to different kinds of English and speeds and topics and that kind of thing. So I don't, rather than compiling a separate list of these things, I'd recommend that you spend some time with this and go to some of these places, and then also follow the guidance on how to select some materials and also spend your time listening to the things that are listed here. Okay, so this schedule has a number of different ideas from around the globe of high quality and useful listening resources for you to select from to do your variety listening. Okay, so Gandali, I see a message there. Some people only have a short amount of time. That's what you have. This schedule is for 10 weeks, but if you only have 4 weeks or 8 weeks, you'll need to make adjustments to how much you are able to do and to fit in within that amount of time. If you have more time, then you can spread some of these things out or double the amount that you do on any of the given weeks here. Yeah, so this schedule you'll need to sort of fit it into what works for your personal circumstances as you're studying for the test, okay? Mostly what I wanted to do here though is share this because of the different resources that are here for you to focus on. So you're gonna do approach number one, you're gonna just try to increase the amount of time you're exposed to English. Now, what's realistic for you for this approach? Could you do these current events or variety listening exercises every week until your test? If you only have 5 or 6 weeks, then maybe you can do 5 or 6 weeks of this schedule. And if listening is your main focus, you can ignore some of these other parts and simply focus on the listening passage. It's really, you'll have to tailor this to your own circumstances as best you can, okay? So variety listening involves focused practice of different skills, okay? So a couple of tips here though. As you're listening to folks from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, the UK, which accents, which types of language are most difficult for you? If you discover that there is one or more types of accents or types of topics that are extremely difficult for you, don't avoid them. Don't avoid them. That sometimes happens. It feels uncomfortable to not know or to not understand as easily. And that is a sign that you should go towards that thing, that you should spend more time with it so that you can develop your skills. So focus on that as you're doing your variety listening. If you're listening to that Australian news channel and it's more difficult to understand than the US news channel, then you should spend more time with Australia and a little less time maybe with some of the US sources there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. So people identifying some accents that can be difficult. Yeah. What happens also is all of you who are attending classes like with me and the conversation clubs and all of that, you also start to become really familiar with your teacher's voice, right? And so maybe my voice and my language, if you've been listening to videos and attending these classes, is becoming easier and easier for you to understand. Okay, that's great. I'm happy about that. But if that's true for you, maybe it's not true for you, I don't know, but that's almost always what happens. But that's a sign you need to then also go out and find some different things to listen to. Yeah. Yeah, I see some people agreeing, yeah, that it is becoming easier to understand me. Good, okay, that's good. That's not bad. And by the way, I'm speaking at a normal rate of speed. I am not slowing things down. I sometimes use simpler vocabulary just to make a point clearer, but I'm trying to make this listening practice also with lessons as well for all of you. So anyway, just so you feel good, if you're having an easier time understanding me, that's great, because I'm not really slowing things down an extreme amount. Good. Okay, and let's see. Oops. The last point, we don't need to spend too much time on all this variety listening. The 75% rule that I talked about before still applies. Okay, so if you are not getting very much out of it, if you can't understand, let's say 75% or less is comprehensible to you, then you're going to have to do something different with it, or maybe move on to a different piece of material, because it doesn't help you that much to be listening to something where you're just not comprehending it. Okay, but as we talked about, there are things you could do. On the last slide, we talked about focusing on tough material that you already know something about or you've already read about in your own language. There are some ways to get something out of really difficult listening material. Okay, good. All right, so, oops. Let's focus, let's keep moving. Let's keep moving. We've got a couple more. I do want to save some time at the end for questions and comments, but let's now get into focus practice. So we have increased our listening amount by maybe a lot, okay? If we're just trying to bump up our immersion listening and we're adding a couple of variety listening exercises to get some exposure to a wide variety of things, now we can apply also some focus practice, right? And this is not something that needs to be extra. This is something that you should do a little bit of with your immersion or your variety listening practice that you do. Some tips to get even more out of those exercises. Remember at the very beginning, I said that, that you will get more out of your listening practice if you do something with the material that you listen to, okay? And that's where we're getting into this right here with focus practice. I would recommend, depending on how much time you have, that you do at least 1 or 2 focused practice sessions with your listening materials every week, okay? So let's talk about what that is. Okay, so the goal of focus practice to do something active to engage with new listening content a few times each week. Okay, so all of that material we've talked about so far. And again, I'm going to give you more ideas from materials here at the end. So what does that mean? It means that you take the listening material and treat it kind of like a homework exercise in a way. Okay, you're focusing on the exercise. So again, not to use the analogy here too much, but if I'm a runner, remember we're thinking about treating IELTS like running a race. Okay, I don't go out every day when I'm running to prepare for a race. I don't go out and run a full marathon every time. I do little drills to make sure I don't get injured or that I can improve my strength a little bit. Musicians will work on scales and other focused exercises to make sure their skills are sharp so that when they're playing their music, they are able to do so as in a skilled way as they possibly can. Well, listening practice can be the same. We can do little academic style exercises on our own to get more out of the experience than we would if we were just putting our headphones in and listening to something for an hour, something like that. Okay, so this tends to be the least fun way to work on listening, but it's important. Okay, so let's talk about that. All right, so first idea, select some materials that have a transcript. Okay, so there are lots of things out there with transcripts. I'm going to share a few ideas in just a moment, but it has a transcript so that when after you've listened the first time through, then you think about what you comprehended, you try to retell the story or summarize what you said, and then you can go back and spend the time and actually read carefully through the passage to see actually what you heard and didn't hear. And you can focus on things like circling vocabulary that you didn't really get the first time through, or identifying sections where you really, even when you read it, you don't really understand completely what's there. That's a great opportunity to go back through and really study the language and the vocabulary of what's there, okay? You get the listening practice, but then you also get to focus on the language that you weren't really comprehending, okay? You can do that a few times. You can go listen, read, and then go back and listen again and listen to the parts where you didn't really get it the first time through. Very often, once you know what's there, you can begin to pick out the sounds and the words that weren't really clear to you the first time through. Have you ever had the kind of thing? I have this all the time. In English, there are many singers, many songs, especially the pop songs that my daughters like to listen to on the radio, where maybe it's because I'm old, just really old, but when I listen to them, I don't really understand all of the words all the time because they're speaking really quickly, or maybe it's just they're not pronouncing the words very clearly, right? And so that happens actually somewhat regularly to me. But after I read the words the first time, then suddenly when I go back and listen again, the words become clear to me in a way that they weren't before. Now, we talked earlier in the lesson about how you don't want to read subtitles the first time through you listening. And I'm still saying that. You definitely need to listen first and then read and study. But that combination of activities can be a really powerful way to improve your English and also to refine your ear so that you're picking up different sounds as they are speaking them, because you know what's coming, because you can read as you listen. Okay, good. Another idea. So after you listen to something, do something with it. Summarize what you heard to another person. You can do that in writing or to yourself, if that's better, okay? If you have another person in your life close to you, a teacher, a friend, a family member, maybe you can find somebody if you live somewhere where there are English speakers. I don't know, try to find somebody. And if you can listen to something and then talk about it or summarize what you listen to with another person, even if they're not a native English speaker, that can be really valuable. If they also listen to the same thing you did, you can talk about what you got out of it, okay? That attention you put towards having to actually be responsible to summarize something in writing or in speech as you're listening, that puts the pressure up a little higher, and it forces you to get a little bit more out of the exercise, right? That's good pressure to put on yourself, to be in the room with somebody and say, we're gonna listen to this for 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna tell you exactly what I heard and summarized, right? You can imagine, you might start doing things like taking notes or writing down words that you want to use as you're trying to summarize to the other person there. That is a good thing to do. Now, if you don't have anybody else in your life who you can do this with, you can do it on your own. You can summarize, you can write, okay? I'm definitely not saying you need to do this every time you listen. That would be too much. You would not probably follow through on that. But can you do something like this once a week with some of your listening passages? That will be really good exercise for your brain, for your ears, for your language ability generally, okay? Okay, as I just mentioned, another thing you can do is take notes and then double check your notes, right? Take notes and then use bullet point number 1. Get the transcript out. See if your notes were accurate, excuse me. See if you did a good job presenting the note or creating notes that were accurate for what you're listening to. Okay, then finally here, you can listen to things, and here's where subtitles come in. You can, if you like watching TV shows, you know, movies get a kind of long with this approach because you have to watch things over again. And so maybe not the best. If you're just gonna watch a movie, you know, if you can watch the movie without subtitles and still understand what's there and enjoy it, that's my recommendation. But I think movies tend to be kind of long and it gets boring for you. And if you're watching with somebody else, they're going to get really angry with you if you keep having to stop and put the subtitles on and rewind and do things like that, right? So maybe shorter shows are a little bit better. And listen to things once, spend a few minutes, and then watch it again with the subtitles. It's the same principle as the transcript idea that we talked about before, okay? Good. All right. So with all of this, as always, with all of your IELTS study, whether it's speaking, reading, writing, listening, don't forget about vocabulary. Keep studying vocabulary, underlining words and pulling out words that you hear you didn't understand. You need to be studying vocabulary every single day. All of you who come to my classes know that that is a big thing for me as an IELTS teacher. I've seen how regular and focused vocabulary study has a big impact on students' scores. And so when you're doing a listening practice, don't forget about this as a vocabulary learning exercise as well, right? Okay, I promise you, we're approach 4, oops, I had one last point I forgot about. If you can get an expert in your life, if you can get somebody in your home, in your community, somebody who knows a little more English than you, if they're not a native English speaker, or if you can find someone you can talk to, even if they are not an English teacher, if they understand, if they know English as their first language, or if they're really good at English, or just even a little better than you, they can be a good person to keep close as you're studying listening in particular, so that they can help clarify things that you hear, idioms and other things that are difficult to look up. It can be valuable to find someone. Okay, so if you've got 5 weeks till your test, if you've got 3 months till your test, can this be part of your plan to try to find somebody in your life who can work with you a little bit if you don't understand or need to reach out, even just with a text message and say, hey, I was listening to this and I didn't understand this part. You know, to have somebody like that in your circle can be a really good thing. And maybe you can offer something in return. You know, I've heard of a lot of arrangements where students will partner with somebody and they'll have some type of mutual benefit that they give to each other. Okay. Good. Let's see. Yeah, I see some questions here. So doing all these steps is going to take a lot of time. Yeah. So you have to find what's realistic for your schedule. Okay. It doesn't necessarily need to take a lot of time. So what I'm suggesting is, yeah, 1 and 2. So the question was, you know, is it okay to do approaches 1 and 2 and skipping these steps? You have to do what fits in your schedule. I would say 1 and 2, approaches 1 and 2 can kind of work together. If you have an hour to listen to English in a week, that's not a lot, but maybe that's all you can afford. And that is where you're coming from. And that's your schedule and how much time you have. And then the suggestion is, you know, can you work in one of these approaches for 3? Can you make one of your listening practices more focused than it would be if you were just listening to something casually? That is going to help you. There are going to be people listening here who have more time, more hours in a week to focus on this. And you can make decisions about how you can incorporate this stuff. What I'm trying to present is things that work, okay? Things that will make your time as valuable as it can be if you have 30 minutes or if you have 5 hours every week to focus on this, okay? So it's a good question. Yeah, I know we're all busy. I don't have time to listen to, you know, I'm always trying to learn a little bit of Spanish, and I don't have a lot of time to focus on it per week, but a little bit of regular practice can help, and you have to make it as realistic for yourself as you can, okay? Good. I see a question in there about providing a link to new words or better vocabulary. I can share a vocabulary resource at the end of the lesson. Yeah, sure. I'll find something to share at the end. Okay. All right. The last point here. Focused IELTS practice. Now we're at the last section, and this is where we're going to transition to what we're going to focus on in Thursday's lesson. In Thursday's lesson, we are going to focus on IELTS question types and specific strategies for IELTS question types that we can use to do a little better and to prepare for the stuff that usually students find the most difficult on the test. Today, we're thinking about how to practice for speaking and how to improve speaking skill. So we can go kind of quickly through this and understand that on Thursday, we're going to get into more detail. And we're actually going to do some practice together with some of the more difficult things that we're likely to encounter on the exam, okay? But with IELTS specific practice now we are focusing on IELTS materials, okay? And we're doing the kind of practice that is going to help us to not only develop listening skill, but IELTS skills as well. And the two things, as I've been saying throughout the lesson, are really important, okay? So to do this, your practice should be a little different than some of the things that we've talked about already, okay? We've talked about, using listening material, listening first, but then using transcripts and doing all those kinds of things, pausing and playing audio recordings, using video, that kind of thing. Part of your practice should be that, to develop your English skill. Part of your practice should be to develop your English and your IELTS skills. Okay, so we're gonna practice listening questions and to become familiar with the IELTS listening passages. Okay, so here, what's critical for you to continue to do in your time up to your IELTS exam. You need to learn about IELTS question types and strategies, okay? We can go over a lot of that in the lesson videos that you have in Magoosh, and on Thursday, we're gonna talk about some things together and to go into depth with that in our live class, okay? You wanna make sure you're always replicating the test. So you're listening while answering questions. Do that, don't ever get away from that. It doesn't matter how much you're struggling, you need to always, when you're practicing IELTS, you need to do that. Never pause the video and stop and look at questions or do anything like that. You need to practice the timing and the sequence of questions as they happen on the actual exam. You want to listen to the thing once. Now, you can go back and listen again for review, especially if you're reviewing answers that you got wrong, something like that. But listen once, don't cheat. Don't listen once and then listen again and answer questions as you listen. That's not going to help you. You need to get the experience trying to encounter a listening passage the first time and to answer questions about it as you listen. That is a skill that you need to develop. Okay, good. So follow the rules of listening section. So you want to make sure that you've got your questions up on the screen or in your booklet. You're not, looking ahead. You're not trying to focus on things that are going to give you a little bit of an advantage that you can't have on the test day. You need to follow the exact rules and guidelines as they're laid out for you, okay? Okay, so when you are practicing listening for IELTS questions, IELTS passages, don't just answer a set of questions and put it away. Oh, I got 7 out of 10 right. Oh, that's pretty good. I'm gonna put it away now. No. You need to focus on those 3 questions that you got wrong and figure out why you got them wrong, okay? There's a lot of learning to do when you are focusing on questions that you got missed, that you got incorrect, okay? So don't just put questions away after they're done. This applies for reading as well. When you miss reading, listening questions, look at the answers, look at what you missed and try to understand why you missed it, okay? Think about the traps. Okay, when you miss a question, or even for some of the questions you got right, it can be really beneficial to go back through the passage and think about, well, what information was IELTS trying to trick me with here? Okay, they're not actually trying to trick you, but they are trying to make questions tough. They want all of the answers to be a little bit, to be tempting, to be close. Maybe if you didn't fully understand all of the language, you might be tempted to make a wrong guess about this or that thing. So go back through and spend time looking at the passage, looking at the answer choices, trying to figure out, well, where were they trying to point me to with the incorrect information? You're going to begin learning about how IELTS creates the questions and what they're looking for. It helps you read the questions better because you understand the thinking behind what types of information is likely to be a wrong answer or a correct answer on the test, okay? So anyway, the point here is to spend time analyzing your responses after you've answered, okay? And as always, use listening practice to learn vocabulary. So after you've done your passages, answered the questions, it is very appropriate to go back through and look up words that you don't know, phrases you don't know, because those words and phrases are likely to come up on the test again, because the IELTS often has some topics that are somewhat predictable in some way. The exact language you can never guess, but the types of language they use are, in some ways, a little bit predictable for each section of the test. So it helps you to study vocabulary from your IELTS practices, okay? Okay, I see some general questions coming in. Let me see, because I'm about to share some resources. Okay, yeah, let's look at the general questions and I'll share some resources for you. Here we go. All right, my exam question, let's see. Okay, so some questions about specific types of questions are causing trouble, even after watching videos in Magoosh. Okay, so yes, we can't, on Thursday, we can't go over all of the IELTS listening question types, but we're gonna focus on the tricky ones. And I see a question here that came in privately, but about matching questions being difficult. Okay, yes, we're gonna take a look at some matching questions and talk about them. We can hopefully identify some ideas to help you answer those more accurately. Okay, so come back on Thursday for that, or watch the recording if you can't make it, because we will focus some attention on matching questions on Thursday. Let's see, I have a different question. In order to start preparation of IELTS questions, should we focus on one module at a time or doing all modules spontaneously? Let me see. You should, that depends a little bit. It's a really good question. So if you have an area of specific weakness, that is where you should focus most of your time. And a good way to get a sense of that is, how are things going in your Magoosh practice? Or have you taken IELTS before and you got a really lower score in one section or the other? It can be very appropriate to focus on one section if you are aware that it is your weakest area, okay? If it is not your weak, if you're not entirely clear which is your weakest, especially if you are beginning to your study journey is just beginning and you are just now learning about the test and what to do on the test, the first place to start is to simply get the basic information about the test. What's in each section, how it's organized, what to expect, and what the basic strategies for answering reading questions and listening questions are, right? You want to get the basic principles so you fully understand the test. And then you want to study vocabulary, always studying vocabulary. You want to make sure you're never losing that. But if you're not aware of a particular weak area, then yes, I do recommend that you work in a little bit of study in each area as you go. And if you're finding as you do that one area is significantly harder for you than others, if listening is that area compared to reading or compared to writing or speaking, you can begin, it is appropriate to begin spending more time on one section and less time on the others, okay? So you want to pay attention to how you're feeling and doing after you have sort of learned the basic core strategies for each of the sections of the test. Okay, and Gandali, so I see your question. Before one day of the exam, is your question, Gandali, before on the day before the test, what would I recommend for you to do? Is that your question? Okay, you can respond. Yes, that's your question. Okay. Yes, before test day, I recommend that you get your mind away from IELTS, okay? I recommend that you focus on getting rest and relaxation, and that begins today. By thinking about your preparation plan, you're answering all the questions you have about just the simple things about test day and what to expect with the test center. So how are you going to get to the test center? What are you allowed to bring into the test center? What aren't you allowed to bring? If you have your cell phone, where's that going to go? Any questions like that you have, you should have them answered well before the test. And you may need to call your test center to have them answer some of those specific questions for you. So that on the day before test, you know how you're getting to the exam center. You know that you have done the absolute best you could to study for the test. And now you get to treat yourself by simply getting a brain rest, eating really well, not doing things that are going to keep you up late at night, okay, and just focusing on yourself and making sure your mind and your body are as ready to go as they possibly can before the test, okay? So don't save things for the last minute. Questions that are simple to answer now, get them answered now, and take care of yourself. That is my recommendation before you take the test. There's nothing you can study the day before that's going to significantly impact your score. You're doing the work now that you should be to prepare, and on the day before you should take care of yourself, okay? Let me get to the last part here. I want to share some resources here. I've got some resources on the screen here. I'm going to share these in a document with everybody watching. One moment, let me copy that. We'll talk about a few things here. One moment. There we go. All right, there's a document. Oh, and for folks on YouTube, I see you out there too. Let me put that in the chat for you. All right, here's a document. I hope I shared that. I don't see anybody getting in there. Nope, you can't get in there yet. Hold on. There you go. All right. So you should be able to open, sorry about that. You should be able to open this link now. And this has links to a few highly recommended listening resources for 1 and 2 that I shared, that the approaches 1 and 2, but also this works for 3, not for 4, because 4 is IELTS specific practice, okay, like Magoosh or the official materials you have. But these ones are great. These ones use highly valuable language for IELTS study, okay? The language is appropriate for IELTS study. You're gonna get good vocabulary. The rate of speed of these materials is really good. So all of these things come highly recommended. So I put the 10-week study plan here up on top, but also, now, I'm not seeing anybody in the document. Can you get, is the link opening for you? Can folks get in there? Oh, you're in. Okay, good. Oh, I don't know why I'm not seeing. Okay, usually I can see your icons up there to let me know that you're in the document. Okay, good. I'm glad that's working. So a few things. Resources like StoryCorps here. Oh, I'm just going to work off the document. That's going to be easier. StoryCorps. Great stories here, wide variety of topics, okay? Some topics you'll be interested in, some topics you won't be interested in, personal stories, okay? Again, nothing here is exactly like the IELTS listening passages. That's for IELTS specific study that you're doing, but the language, the tone, the pace are going to be appropriate and help you with your English studies, okay? So, some ideas there. If you click through, almost all of these have some place where they put the the transcripts of the passages. StoryCorps definitely has that. TED Talks, okay, we're thinking about, there's a question earlier about academic style lectures. I think TED Talks are really wonderful, and you can actually find people with different English accents from around the world. There's so many thousands of TED Talks out there these days. I'm sure you're aware of what they are. It's not new, but I highly recommend them as a free resource to get really good and interesting listening practice, okay? Here's a favorite of mine. It's called This I Believe. This was also from a public radio resource. This one has very short speeches that people give about a wide variety of topics. There are thousands of them in there. You can look through and find things that look interesting to you. And then they also have the transcript available for study afterwards. The one thing I don't love about this, I believe, the pace of these is a little bit slower because you can tell the people are reading from something. It's not just spontaneous speech. But I don't think the speed is so different from a lot of your IELTS questions, passages that you're listening to, that it's inappropriate. So this is good. Vocabulary is good, speed is good, and the topics, there are lots of topics that are going to be useful for you to listen to. Planet Money, lots of good stuff related to the economy and other topics that might be discussed for part 4 of the speaking test. Deeply Human, same thing. This is from the BBC. Also good stuff for listening and preparing yourself to hear academic style lectures. The topics there are useful for that kind of study. Okay, so this is a good place to start. This, in addition to the what we talked about earlier in the lesson, this 10-week language study plan that we have. From this, if you've got a couple of months to study for the test, there would be enough material here to fill up your time that you're planning to devote to listening, for sure. Okay, so anyway, this is a good place to start. Is this the only good stuff out there? No. And there are students are coming to me all the time with ideas, podcasts, other things like that, that can be extremely useful as well. I recommend looking around just on the BBC, the British Broadcasting website itself. Just has so much video and audio content for you. British English, it can be a really rich place to just put a bookmark on your internet browser and go back to it regularly and see the new stories that are there. That can be a good way to just to build in a little bit of English listening into your regular routine. Okay, so this is a lot of me talking today about how to go about improving your listening skills. On Thursday, we're going to come back and you all are going to, we're going to work together on IELTS practice questions. And we're going to, you are going to do some work. I'm going to help you to take a close look at the passages and the questions. And we're going to try to answer the questions that you have about IELTS specific listening exercises so that you can feel like you're having your questions answered and that we are working through some of the really difficult pieces of the IELTS listening test. Okay, so at this time, we're just about the end of our hour and 75 minutes here. What questions do you have? What can I answer for you before we head out? Please put them in the chat. Don't unmute yourself, just because that gets a little crazy. But if you have questions for me now, we can take a couple minutes and look at those before we sign off for today. So go ahead, I'll give you a moment here. If you have questions, put them there. And if not, then we will sign off for today and pick it up on Thursday. Any questions? No, could I have the presentation link? Oh, yeah, sure. Let me see. View, okay, this should work. Oh yeah, Aisha, link for words. Okay, yes. Good, a link for vocabulary. We've got some good vocabulary. Okay, one moment. I'm looking up a resource here to share. Okay, here's a place to start. Here's a good place to start. This is for Okay, here's a good place to start for IELTS specific vocabulary, a blog resource with some recommendations for you to find useful material for studying vocabulary. But then we've got a few resources with lists and other things that are going to help you on a variety of sections of the test. Okay, so start there. Start there with your vocabulary. Yeah, we also have some podcasts with Magoosh. Yeah, and actually those are on YouTube as well, I believe. They're still on YouTube there. Magoosh vocabulary podcast, IELTS, another good resource there. Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Sometimes I even forget what we have there. There's some good stuff here for vocabulary study. We put these out a couple of years ago. I'll put a link in there. Good. Okay, so there's a link to the vocabulary podcast that we put on as well. That's another place to start. The blog post that I shared just a moment ago is really a good place to begin because it leads you to a variety of places with vocabulary that you can find useful. Okay, so let me see. I'm backing up here. Let's see, presentation link, link for words. Yes, I did. Okay, so the biggest obstacle for me is when answers are thrown in a hurry. Is there any suggestion from your side? Yeah, yes, there is. We're gonna focus on that on Thursday. So the strategy that will, Lohit, I see your question there. The strategy here that we're gonna focus on has to do with preparing yourself for the section. So in the time you have to prepare, to look at the questions before the listening passage starts, there are things we can do to prepare ourselves to be ready to hear and understand the questions when they come at us really quickly. Okay, and so that can help. It can also help depending on the question type we're looking at, to understand, how to handle it when the information comes at you fast. Okay, so we don't have time. It's going to help us more, Lohit, if we focus on this when we're looking at the actual questions on Thursday. So hopefully you can come then, and if not, then that will be on a recording for you. But that's definitely something we're going to think about on Thursday. Okay, let's see. Somebody had I see, Alai, your question, you can't open this page on your profile. What do you mean there? Which page? The blog post or are you talking about the PowerPoint slides? Which page can't you answer? Maybe I can help you get that open. How can we improve listening for question related to directions? Yeah, so we're gonna have to, that's where the directions questions, I think those are best practiced by actually studying IELTS part 2 questions where they're giving directions. Okay, that is because there aren't a lot of listening resources out there for you to study hearing directions. You can certainly study some of the vocabulary related to directions, but then I think if those sections are really difficult for you, it becomes practicing the listening, the part 2 listening where they're giving directions, but then also studying and learning as much as you can about how to approach map related questions, because sometimes the problem is just understanding how to strategize for those questions. Okay, so yeah, that's where I would start, and certainly something that we can talk about on Thursday. Okay. A good question here. In general question, is Magoosh the name of a person or just the class? Magoosh is the name of our company. We're a test prep company that we don't just do IELTS, we do TOEFL, we do GRE preparation, we do GMAT for business school. We do high school tests in English. The high school students take what's called the ACT and SAT. So our goal is to provide affordable and high quality test prep for students studying for those exams. Magoosh is, I believe the word comes from Sanskrit. I think that's right. And it means, I believe, wise and learned teacher. And so we wanted to, the name of the company is related to our mission, which is to help students to learn about these tests in a way that is accessible to them so that they can do the best that they can to meet their graduate school or college or immigration goals, whatever it is. Okay, so it's not a person, it's a name that kind of describes our mission in some ways. Okay. Okay, Elena, study resources. You can't open the study resources. Oh, okay. Let me try sharing that again. I see other people are in the study resources. So let me try it again and let's see if the link works for you this time. Okay. So Isaac, your question, are we gonna have a test in this class? No, we don't have tests in this class. These are drop-in classes where you can come and we talk about the topics, but there are no exams about the classes themselves. Okay. Good. All right. And Aleja, are you able to get into the document now that I shared it again? Maybe it's just because I updated the sharing. Good. Okay. All right, everybody. I think we are out of time here today. Aslam, you can get in. Good. Okay. And I'm submitting a survey of speaking assessment in late. Does it make it? No. Yeah, Isaac, you can submit your speaking surveys and responses at any time, and they will get to us as long as you hit that. If you're talking about speaking grading, you hit that checkbox to make sure we receive it. At the last question in your speaking practice, you hit that box and it will come to us then. If you have graded interviews left, we will see it then. I think that's what you're talking about. Oh, okay, Isaac, what do you mean by survey? Are you talking about submitting for grading? Something you submitted yours? Okay, sorry, I'll try to slow down a little bit. What did you submit 5 days? What do you mean by survey? Oh, that survey. Oh, the survey from speaking class. Yes, I misunderstood. Yes, you can submit that anytime. That's fine. That just comes to me. There's no response that you're going to get directly about that survey. Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about speaking grading. Yeah, good. Okay, everybody, thank you. Thank you to everybody out there on YouTube. Thanks for joining us here today. Thank you to Magoosh students. All of you Magoosh students who come to Conversation Club. As I mentioned at the beginning, we had trouble yesterday with my computer. It died in the middle of our class, and I'm really, really sorry about that. But as you can see, my new computer here is working just fine. And so tomorrow we will have Conversation Club for you Magoosh students. And on Thursday, as promised, we're going to dig in deeper into listening and look at questions together on Thursday and answer as many questions as you have, but then also to try to focus our time on the really difficult stuff you're likely to find on the listening test. Okay. All right, everybody, I have to go. Thank you all. I'm going to end it here and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye. Great participation today. Thank you.